You've been down here in Olympia for how long?
I almost 6 months as a state rep, and then just finished a 60-day legislative session.
60 days. So that would have put you in Jan?
That's right. Yeah, January 7th, I think, is when we gavelled in.
Did you get anything done?
We did. We did get some things done, which...
what are you most proud of?
I'm really proud. We have put the foundation in place to fix our ferries. For years, we've underfunded the boats. We haven't had a coalition to get them funded. That is changing here. And we have some great folks beating the drum, and I'm proud to be part of that gang.
Well, so obviously that's a big issue for people on the islands. And if I remember right, like the ferry system, had trouble getting the boats actually repaired, running, having people there to actually work the boats, all that kind of stuff. This bill is meant to help with those things.
Yeah, and you're right. If you can't agree on what the problem is, it's hard to come up with the right solution. Luckily, we've got good alignment. There's been staffing shortages in the engine room, on the deck, in the captain's house. There have been challenges with vessel maintenance. We have a rapidly aging fleet. Many vessels are beyond obsolescence. How do you keep them afloat? And then we've had a procurement program that should have already delivered 7 boats. It's delivered 0. And so we've really got to jumpstart that. And to the credit of, you have put a bunch of politicians in a room. We actually are slowly figuring this one out, trying to get the resources to then make it happen.
That's cool. So you are Greg.
That's right.
Tell us, Greg, your full name. Tell us where you grew up, and tell us what you do. What you do now.
Yeah, my name is Greg Nance. I grew up over on Kitsap, on Bainbridge Island, and I am a state representative. So I represent Kitsap in the 23rd Legislative District down here in Olympia as a state representative.
And how long you've been doing that?
Almost 6 months. So I am the newest member of the State House. I'm literally number 98 of 98.
How old are you, Greg? Can I ask you that?
I am 35 years old.
You're 35.
Yep.
How do you fare in terms of age of state reps?
I'm the young gun around here. So yeah, my roommate is almost double my age. There's folks that have had long distinguished careers before getting to the legislature. So yeah, I'm trying to bring a little bit of a youth perspective to all this.
Did you always want to work in politics?
No, I didn't. I always wanted to make a difference. And through my life experiences, particularly in the nonprofit sector, I've realized that policy is really, really important. And politics is one big way to move the levers of policy.
Got it. So you are a brand new, brand spanking new congressperson, state congressperson, or state representative. And you are one of the youngest or the youngest?
Yeah. If not the youngest, one of the youngest. I think I'm on that short list.
And this is not something you always wanted to do. And it's also not necessarily the career path that a lot of folks are choosing to follow, especially in the last couple decades. What about it attracted you to it that you think is different than maybe what other people see in it? Yeah.
So I'll say that when I was in college, I read an Economist article, and it was called Sensible in Seattle. Here's the Global Economist magazine talking about Washington State's political system and why we actually get stuff done. And part of what they credited was the top 2 primary. And they said, look, like there's a lot of polarization around the country, and yet, hey, Seattle and Washington State's getting this right. And I remember reading that and be like, wow, like that's a really cool deal. A couple years later, I learned about an initiative in the State House of Representatives that is all about making college free. And I thought that was a great idea, because I think it's totally unfair that just because your parents don't have much money or you're not from the right school, you get locked out of an education. I think that's super unfair. That's not the American way. And hey, here we are in Washington actually trying to do something about it. And we did something about it. The New York Times writes a great article about, hey, Washington State is nailing this. That policy was drafted out by my predecessor in the House of Representatives, who became a mentor and a friend over time. Drew Hansen is his name. Amazing guy, and actually getting to know a real life politician and how he's actually a problem solver. And that's how he views his role. and how much impact he can make for tens of thousands of families. I was so blessed to be from a home where we valued education. My parents were both able to save with and it was just always an expectation. And when there's an expectation and when there's the resources, kids can make their dream happen with the help of their parents, the help of their community. Every kid deserves that opportunity. And Washington State House of Representatives made that happen. And I had a front row seat to watching it happen years ago. And that was really the seed planted for me that policy really matters. And you need people that care and that are willing to really stand up and fight for working families and for kids. And I want to be that kind of person that's in that fight, doing whatever I can to get the resources, get the policy right.
Very cool. So one of the things that you and I got to know each other, I think only a few years ago through a mutual acquaintance. And I think through related to Seahawks football.
That's right. Go Hawks.
Hawks, right? And I remember at the time you were about to embark on a run across the country, which is insane. It's insane. Yeah. And I remember you telling me a little bit about that story and what got you to even that point, which was also pretty crazy. Let's maybe start back with how you kind of got here. Give me a high level 50,000 foot step by step of like your career path that got you here.
Yeah. Wow. So it begins in my childhood where both my parents are in public service. Dad is a longtime public defender, helped start the Seattle Public Defender back in 1983, which happens to be the year the Seahawks first made the playoffs. My dad was also a Kingdom beer vendor nice. During that season and got to watch the games while selling Coors Light. My mom is a longtime union social worker for the state, helping both old folks with nursing home supervision and then previously with child protective services. And so both, all these careers, they're not glorious. There's not, they're hard work. They're not paid well, but the work matters and it matters a lot. And being around the table growing up, just hearing what your folks are working on, service was just one of those ethics in our house. Like, hey, you work hard and it's not just about you and your bank account. It's also trying to help people. And you throw in my grandpa, Charlie, into the mix, who was this large than life character in our family. He was a rock quarryman during the Great Depression to provide for his family as a teenager. And then when he was 17, he joined the Marines and ended up fighting throughout the South Pacific, including in Iwo Jima, where he literally ran out of bullets defending his men, had to use a shovel in his foxhole. And so our family, deeply valued service. We're also a Southern family, and both my folks, they met and married in Mississippi. And the result of that is like sports were a big deal too. Unfortunately for me, I was always 100 pounds soaking wet kind of a guy growing up. And so played football, played basketball, played baseball, played tennis, played soccer. It wasn't until my senior year with going out for the track team that I finally found a sport where I was, decent at, and then realized, hey, like I actually have a talent for this, which was the first time I'd really experienced that. And all of that together, so I knew I wanted to do something impactful and helpful. I also was competitive and I wanted to be great, had never really been great, but wanted to work at it. I go off to college and all of these influences are kind of spiraling for me. And I have my aha moment was being a teacher on the south side of Chicago as a youth mentor, initially teaching kids chess, teaching kids debate, and then teaching kids about finances and about applying to school, applying to college, and then how do you pay for it. Those early experiences all kind of whirled in where I became an accidental entrepreneur. From my dorm room with four of my best buddies, we began an organization called Money Think. And Money Think is all about how do you equip young people to get into college and then pay for it. Less debt, more degrees is the mantra. And that showed me just how impactful a couple people with a big idea and a lot of energy can be. And over the years, got involved with a number of education, nonprofits and non-profitables where we tried to make money but didn't. Had a number of those experiences too. And over near 15 years of that nonprofit work, began to see just how important policy is, as I mentioned, where if the policy is giving you a big headwind, no matter how good of the work you're doing on the ground, it's way harder than it could be or should be. And that was a motivation for me to begin getting involved initially as a door knocker to go talk about school board races and talk to neighbors about what issues matter. And then in short order, realizing that we got to get strong candidates up and down the ballot elected too. And before long, I get nominated to, hey, we want you to step up and actually do this, which was a great honor, and also one that I don't think anyone's ever really prepared for, like when you actually are embarking on that. So I had a 15-year run as a nonprofit exec, great, eye-opening experience in so many ways. And despite all that training, you're still learning a ton in the new post too.
Got it. That sounds like a pretty linear path.
Hey.
Like you've had, parents that were strong influences. You found a sport that you loved. You went to college. You found friends that shared a passion for doing something very virtuous. And, then you become this long distance runner, and now you're a state rep. Like, sounds pretty cookie cutter almost. Am I missing anything in that story?
Yeah, none of it felt linear while it was happening. So, my senior year of college, I'm deciding between Teach for America, between continuing to build out this nonprofit, going to graduate school in England where I had a scholarship to go, which was exciting, or joining the Marine Corps as a officer candidate school to become a lieutenant in the Marines. So, yeah, it felt like a really big fork in the road with 4 pretty different options. And at a lot of junctures, there's been that proverbial fork in the road. And so, yeah, looking back, it's like, yeah, all of these dots connect pretty smoothly. There have been a lot of junctures where I thought about quitting everything, just going full on as wanted to be a professional runner and earn my living that way. I've thought about various military services, particularly doing intelligence work more recently. That's been something that's bubbled up repeatedly for me in my journey. And then a number of private sector opportunities too, where nonprofit salary with a bunch of student debt is not a great recipe. It's nice to also be able to provide for yourself, provide for your family. And so, yeah, it has felt less linear and more forks in the road as we go. Though looking back, the dots will connect, and I realized, wow, I was learning this vital skill or experience through, this first tour of duty that would then lead to a second. Though in the moment, it didn't always feel that way.
I think you've told me before that when you were a kid, you dreamed of being an astronaut or a fighter pilot or things of that nature. Am I remembering right? You're
remembering right. So I grew up building model planes with my dad, dreaming about flying and honoring our family's military tradition by becoming a fighter pilot. Went so far as applying and being nominated and appointed to West Point Military Academy. Learned I was colorblind midway through that process and had to do some reflecting about, hey, what do I really want? And realized that, I wanted to make a difference. I didn't yet know how, but let me take a path that will give me the best shot was the big goal.
That must have been a big moment for you when you kind of had this idea for a while that you wanted to be a fighter pilot and then discovered this limitation. How old were you when that happened?
I was had just turned 18, so that was the fall of 2006, and I was already going through, I think, some tough stuff, and some anxiety, some depression, and then you throw in one of those moments where I had just lost my granddad, and a lot of he never ever pressured me, just would gently encourage whatever I was aiming to do, but I really wanted to honor our family's tradition, and I thought that would be a fitting way to do so. And when you're 18, it feels like, the sky is collapsing on you in those moments and in those setbacks. I now know with years of hindsight that those moments actually can be beautifully catalytic, where it, it's like after a fire runs through a forest, it's devastating in short term, but actually medium and long term, it can be a recipe for renewed growth. And that's what that experience was for me, losing my granddad. And then all the soul searching that follows, how do I live up to this amazing person? How do I honor his memory? How can I be the best version of me I can be? His loss really catalyzed all of that reflection and then the action that's followed. And very, very tough, especially for a teenager to process all of that in real time. With years of hindsight, it was a beautiful gift he gave me to have that season of reflection too.
A lot of folks, when they're imagining what they want to do growing up, compensation's a big part of it, or where they're going to live, or some kind of cool factor. Fighter pilot, not necessarily going to make, I don't even know what a fighter pilot makes. And I'm not guessing that was a primary part of how you were determining that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah. Lower on the priority list.
Yeah. It sounds like family, like honoring your family what were the factors that, I mean, I realize it was when you were a kid, but what were the things that were going through your head that made that something that you wanted to do?
Yeah. I loved adventure stories as a kid, like would read anything that kind of transported me through time and space. And that, I think, above all, was actually what I was optimizing for as a kid, where I want to do something adventurous, something noble, something that would transport me, was kind of the idea. And I grew up on Bainbridge Island, which is a really lovely place, but not when you're a kid. You feel like you're trapped and you can't get away. And by the time I was in high school, the thing I was optimizing for was, I got to get out of this place. Even though it's a beautiful place, and I literally live there now. I could live most anywhere. I live there because it is such a nice place. But when you're a teenager, you can feel tormented by that. You feel like you're so limited and constrained. And that, I wanted to adventure. I wanted to see the world. And that was a big thing that I was optimizing for. And I think that's part of the draw of the military is you're going to see more of the world than just your little backyard. And then I also learned that, hey, there's more than, just the military to go see more of the world and to go do something hopefully useful and helpful to folks too.
We're going to jump around here a little bit.
Please.
Because I know your story isn't this linear. I have that benefit, and I want to get into a little bit more of some of the sidewinding aspects of this. So when you and I met, and you were telling me about this cross-country run you're going to do, over 3,000 miles, how many marathons straight was that? I can't remember.
A bunch of marathons, yeah. 84 days of running 1.5 marathons a day on average.
That is as somebody who can barely run, a few miles at this point without keeling over, that is just outstanding. Anyway, you did that to benefit a charity. First, tell us what that charity was.
Yeah, Run Far Foundation for Youth Mental Health.
And why was that the cause that you chose?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I lost my granddad. That was a really, really tough time for me. And I didn't realize at the time, but anxiety and depression led to substance abuse. Initially malt liquor and then vodka, and then adding in opiates like Percocet and Vicodin. And that's dangerous. It's obviously very unhealthy. And yet it was just so normalized for me and my circle of friends that didn't realize I had a problem. And yet for 7 years, really dealt with some tough stuff around that. Only with the benefit of several years, looking back, said, hey, like that was actually a mental health issue. Like when you don't have good treatment or counseling or resources for depression or for anxiety or any string of other things, you can try to cope with whatever you can have. And I know from being a youth mentor now for 20 plus years that a lot of young people go through tough stuff. And part of the challenge of growing up is you feel like you're the only one going through this tough thing, which is not true ever. Like you're always one of several that are actually dealing with the exact same challenge at the exact same time, but it still feels isolating. And that's really the mission, is in running across the country, met thousands of people in this wonderful country that we have. And in the course of that, I realized just how much we have in common and just how familiar these challenges are between, big New York City and like the Appalachian foothills. And those were 8 days apart. And in the Appalachian foothills, where these folks are like shocked that there's someone who's run all the way from New York, you're having a beautiful conversation. And then you get to the other side, you're in Ohio farmland, you're having the same conversation. And it's across the country over and over again. And it reminded me that we have a lot of challenges in America. We also have all of the right stuff to work through it, including just good, decent people. And we care about kids. We have a different way of showing that sometimes, but we all want what's best for our kids and our community. And so often we kind of talk past each other. And that was one of my big goals, is just listen and hear where they're at, what their concerns are for their kids, and how we work together, rally together, and get the resources we need to actually move forward. So it was a super uplifting experience, despite the physical travails of running 1.5 marathons a day.
I watched your progress the whole way. I loved watching it. That was amazing. And if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more, a lot of folks, almost everybody's dealing with some form of anxiety or depression nowadays, whether they're kids or adults. And how old were you when that started? When you started finding that substances were something you turned to for this? What was kind of the catalyst for that?
Yeah, I was 16 and my granddad had a stroke, was the direct deal. Although I think the story frequently goes back years before. And for me, it was losing my cousin Brandon in a car accident 2 years before that. And in the wake of that tragedy, basically night terrors and like unable to sleep through the night, and then being teased by friends because the one way I was able to get a good night's sleep was actually sleeping in my brother's bunk bed. And my friends thought that was the funniest thing. And, a lot of juvenile, banter and joking, which when you're 14 doesn't feel like a joke. And especially now when you've just lost your beloved cousin. So that was a really tough season. And that's part of that's a core message I have for kids is, hey, like, be kind to each other. And, it's fun to joke with your buddies, but keep it in good, in good spirit. And jokes are actually funnier when you're making fun of yourself instead of someone else. And be kind to each other and be good to each other and be kind to yourself too. Because I think a lot of this it's kids frequently feel pain or feel anguish or discomfort, and they can lash out at each other. And oftentimes a little bit of kindness can go a really long, beautiful way at helping someone else feel secure and feel safe. And all of a sudden there's a positive ripple through a classroom or a school or a playground.
So you were dealing with this for, you said, 6 or 7 years.
That's right. Yep.
And that was through college.
That's right. Yep.
And you were running in college as well. You were an athlete in college, and then you started this nonprofit program, which I think still exists today.
Still going.
Going. So you were kind of a functional person dealing with this addiction issue, and it continued. You actually started. I remember somehow you got to China. I need you to help me connect those dots. You from Chicago, where you're going to school. How did you get to China?
Yeah, so I long time curiosity about the world and about adventure. It goes back. I was a kindergartner. My kindergarten teacher is Hawaiian Chinese American, and so like we celebrated the Lunar New Year, and she would point at a map. I watch a big ship come into the port of Seattle while riding the ferry, and wow, Dad, where's that ship from? That's from China. And so long time just interest and fascination. By the time I'm in high school, I do debate, which was like my big thing. I was never a very good athlete. I was a pretty good debater. And in the course of debate, my favorite subjects were foreign policy. And that was a little bit of a hint of what was to come, because during college, my favorite professor taught us foreign policy. And great professor, totally brought the subject to life. And after a couple semesters of this, it's like, wow, I am hooked. Like, this is way more interesting than my astrophysics textbook, where I'm kind of like hovering around a C average and getting schooled. And foreign policy, like, it's so interesting. Like, I would be reading this even if it weren't assigned, kind of a vibe. And my professor said, look, you're not going to be able to understand China until you go. Help me find a program that would actually pay for me to go to China. So free airfare, free 3 weeks stay, and then get to study at a place called Tsinghua, which is the Harvard of China. And so there's a really just amazing experience. And this was August of 2009. So immediately after the Beijing Olympics, which I had watched feverishly, like, wow, Michael Phelps, and Nastia Liukin was actually my real favorite, the gymnast. But going to China then in 2009, amazing eye-opening experience. I'm a big journaler. I've been journaling since I was in 4th grade. And my last sentences out of that summer of 2009 were like, this is a really special place. I've got to find a way back. And so, I knew like this, I feel a connection to this place, and I got to find a way back.
And you got there and you ended up starting a company.
That's right.
Is that right? What was this company?
Yeah, it was called dyad.com, dyad.com. And it was all about mentorship. So Plato, a couple thousand years ago, talked about within each of us, there's a dyad, a present self, what you are today, and then a potential self, what you can become. And in some ways, that's the purpose of life, is to like discover your potential. And I believe the missing ingredient there is a mentor, someone that can actually guide you to help unlock and uncover like that potential. And came up with this idea with a friend from business school. We were in the UK studying, and I learned, he's a Chinese fellow. I learned more about China and about their education industrial complex, there is so much academic fraud where we get this. There are companies where if you pay in, they will just take your SAT for you. Or they will take your GMAT for you. They'll take your TOEFL, which is an English language exam. And so it's just like tons of fraud. And hearing that, I was like, look, that is so not fair to students who are willing to work hard. It's a huge loss to American universities that are admitting kids that can't actually do the work. And then it's a huge disservice to the students that are actually unfairly getting an opportunity that they can't actually, if you don't know English, you're not going to be able to thrive at an American university. And then it's a loss to the world. Like, we need more people that have some mutual understanding, some mutual respect, that understand each other's culture. And that does not happen if there's a ton of, academic fraud on the scale of hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And so that was really the founding idea that we had for Dyad.com. And heck of a ride. Yeah, this was 2011 when we really got going. Moved to China in 2012. And when I first moved, China was really, it seemed like seeking to build a great relationship with the United States. But in very short order, the tune changed. And by the end of my experiences in China, it was obvious that our industry was in trouble. And it was obvious that an authoritarian country like China, if the top leadership wants to literally prohibit an entire industry overnight, they can, and they did. And so myself, along with thousands of other international business people, lost our shirts in the course of all this. And it's a great, a brilliant roller coaster ride, the highest highs of my life and the lowest lows. And it's one of those experiences that may sound a little linear now, but my goodness, every day is a choose your own adventure. And it feels like if we're not careful, we're going to run off a cliff.
I'm not sure I totally understand the timeline there and the business.
Yeah.
So Dyad.com, you started it here in the States?
From my dorm room in England. Yeah.
Okay. You started in England with your buddy UK who's from China.
Correct. Yep.
Correct. Okay. And the problem it was solving was finding mentors for who?
Yeah. So imagine students from around the world that have a big goal. They want to go to an American university.
Okay.
There is so much misinformation. And then there's these agencies out there that basically want to exploit you. They want to take a big chunk of change from you and your parents. And then, we're just going to send someone in there to take the SAT for you. So there's no guidance, there's no growth, there's no introspection, there's no learning. That was the problem we want to solve. How do we actually help students who want to do this the right way?
I see.
And China, why China? Well, my co-founder is Chinese. China has the world's largest education market. And we figured, hey, if we can make it here, China, we can make it anywhere.
Was the target market really the student, or was it their parents?
A little bit of both. So we built a strong social media presence where for a couple of years there, I could be like on the subway, going, heading to work or heading home, and people would recognize me. Ma Chin Li, my Chinese name, because I was the video guy that would actually share, hey, here are these lessons, for you and your application. So we built a pretty substantial following on the Chinese net. And it was all give it away for free. People can learn. And then those that wish to pay and are able to pay can pay. And then we offer a ton of scholarships on top of that, because our goal is to help everyone. Anyone that's motivated, we want to get you the information you need. And it was pretty special building a social enterprise that helped a lot of folks. And really, we were the first of our kind. Before we were in business, no one over there was doing any of that.
So the business model then, they or their parents would pay not for the training, but for a mentor. If they liked the person that was providing the mentorship, they could actually pay that person to mentor them directly.
That's right.
Is that right? So it sounds like it was going reasonably well enough that you then decided to move to China to run the business.
That's right. Yep.
And by moving to China, somehow the business became beholden to the government. Explain that connection a little bit more.
And not I wouldn't say beholden, rather our biggest market was China. And so initially, we did business in 27 countries all over the world, from Honduras to Egypt to India, though China was 90% of the business.
Got it.
And it's such a referral oriented business that once you have a good foundation and you do a good job, friends tell friends, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, we have a lot of clients and they're from China. Over time, though, you know, when you become reliant on a single market, and that market happens to have an authoritarian government, there's a political risk to continued operation. And eventually, our firm, along with hundreds or thousands of others, felt what it's like to have a headwind from, you know, an authoritarian government. And eventually, all of these private sector companies were kicked out of China. You know, you can no longer legally operate in China.
I see.
And so, it's and we're a tiny fish in that pond. There were some big players that lost everything too, which is a lot harder.
How old were you at this point?
I was 31. Yeah. So a few years ago.
And you had graduated, you're at graduate school, you were now doing this as your job. I assume you had maybe built up a little debt from school, and was this your first like paying job?
First job out of college. And I'd done a lot of like landscaping, construction, and roofing and decking, but okay. First job where I'm kind of like applying my education, and let's go for it was the mentality.
So this is your first job. You started a company as your first job, which I think is it's pretty special. Like there's not a lot of folks that you often get an entrepreneurial person not going to school. They start after high school or something. They can't stand the idea of like going down some path.
Yeah.
But you started after school.
That's right.
And you've started to find some success. You're still dealing with your addiction at this point. Yes. Yeah.
Going through some ups and downs. Yeah. The entrepreneurial lifestyle, it can be stressful, especially when people are counting on you. And that made it really tough because, you know, I can tell, hey, if I'm drinking, I feel like I'm letting myself down, and I now have a team of people and customers counting on us. And so that was an extra ripple to all of this. By the time I moved to China, I had been sober for 9 months when I moved to China. And thank goodness, because China has a very heavy drinking culture. Like that's just part of business there. And because I was able to say, hey, actually, I don't drink. It was actually much easier than saying, you know, I don't drink much, because that doesn't work.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so I have to then ask, like, what was the point of when you were able, the 9 months prior, like what happened that stopped your drinking?
Yeah. So I tried to quit 100 times over the years. Like I knew, hey, this is not me at my best. It really reached a critical juncture where I was living my dream. I was in England with a full scholarship from the Gates Foundation to study at my dream school, Cambridge University, all about innovation and management. And it's like, wow, like this is so cool. And I'm living this out. And I am also feeling a lot of stress and pressure because of that. I had broken up with this, you know, wonderful gal. So I'm feeling like homesick and kind of heartsick around all that. I don't have any friends yet. I'm brand new. And a lot of my kind of worst habits really came out full force, particularly because with this stipend, I had some cash in my pocket for once, and in short order, am blowing through this stipend to the tune of, I don't have enough to actually pay my rent this month. And word gets around quick that, hey, like this guy that has like a big scholarship, apparently doesn't have enough money to pay his rent. What's going on? And get called into the provost's office, and, you know, he did not mince words. You are a disgrace. And if I could, I would expel and deport you. And I had never been spoken to that way by any kind of authority figure. I was so delusional in that moment. I actually thought when I got called in the provost's office that I was going to get some kind of award. Like that's literally how delusional I was. The last time I had been in a provost's office, it was to have my scholarship announced. And so I was like, wow, like, did I get something else? And no, you did not. You got a talking to that you deserve. And, you know, I felt lower than a snake in that moment, but I went back home. I strapped up my running shoes. I went for like an 18-mile run. And later that month, I ran my first ultra marathon, 50K on the Jurassic Coast there in South England. And that became really the foundation where I never went to treatment, never went to rehab, didn't do AA for the next 10 years. But running for me, and like just the daily therapy of that, where I've run, you know, almost every day of my adult life, that was my kind of counseling. That was my therapy. And again, for those listening, they're going through a tough thing. Like I suggest counseling and therapy. Like those are actually really good modalities. I was not mature enough at 23 to acknowledge that I had a problem, let alone to invest in a solution to that problem. So it I got really fortunate that running was able to really help me through that season.
Wow. So now you've picked running up in a big way. You obviously were a runner, later in high school through college, but now you're doing ultra marathon running. And 9 months later, you're in a heavy drinking culture, and you didn't find that super challenging?
Challenging in certain respects. Luckily, England is also a heavy drinking culture.
Yeah, that is true.
And so I got some good practice. And by the time I'm in China, I actually am starting to feel healthier than I had, happier than I had. And I'm running every day. And I basically have found that, hey, I can feel really good with, by reading, by journaling, by eating right, by having a special meal, like little things that are a lot less destructive to you than going on a bender for 3 days. And that was a little bit of the mentality is, hey, like, what are the things that actually make me happy rather than just masking feelings of hopelessness or sadness?
I love that. And then I also am just imagining, I know how stressful work is for most people. You're in a foreign country with a business that you've launched with a partner, and it doesn't go well every day. And there's probably people counting on you and all this kind of stuff. So I think we all have our most challenging moments of doing healthy things when we're under the most stress, right? Did you just run more? Like, I mean, how did that work?
Yeah, it was tough. And, I was actually logging my hours just out of curiosity. Hey, like, how much am I actually working? And there were several 105, 110, 112 hour weeks where you're waking up at 6 a.m. and you're going till midnight with very few breaks in between. And that's what it felt like we needed to do to grind our way into this market. And that was part of my mentality is like, no one, there are people that are smarter than me for sure, but I'm not going to let someone outwork me. And that was really the mentality for our team. And you try to build a culture around that. And I'll say that over a couple of years' time, you are grinding people down with that kind of mentality. And so over the course of, my 7 years in Shanghai, reached better, healthier equilibrium, because you can't actually just burn rubber 24/7, or else, you run out of treads on the tire to do what you're aiming to do here. So you got to find your sustained race pace. And it took a few years. We did, and we got to a really healthy place. And I'd like to think that in my own personal journey, I'm finding that now too, where I still love to race. I love training and competing. But I also know that, like, I need 8 hours of sleep to be at my best tomorrow as well.
Well, and part of what I'm struck by, besides these various threads of your life and how they've been woven, is distance running is time consuming. Running your own business is time consuming. Sleeping is certainly time consuming. And then you're not just doing distance running, you're doing ultra distance running. And at some point, didn't you run like marathons across different continents or countries or something like that? Am I remembering right?
You are, yeah.
What was that?
That was 7 marathons in 7 days on 7 continents. So.
And when did this happen?
That was Jan 31st to Feb 6 of 2019.
Okay, so this was around this time.
Yep, still operating the business. Yep. And
how did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, part of the secret here is not well. So yeah, you're right on that. To be great at anything, it's got to become a passion, and it's got to become a really. I'm one of these guys where I believe in the power of obsession. Where if you're just kind of going through the motions, you're never going to reach your potential at anything. And especially when it's a competitive, business is really competitive. Running is really competitive. Most anything worth doing is competitive. And if you want to be great, you got to put in the time and the effort to be great. So you're right on there. One thing that surprised me was I was a much, much sharper decision maker when I was running and like really training. And part of how I think that worked for me is that would be the hour or 2 or 5 where I would be kind of alone with my thoughts to really process, where I was in 10 to 20 meetings in a day, and there's just so much data and inputs coming at you at all times. Those long runs would be where like kind of like the puzzle pieces would sort of fit into place. And I would start to see hidden connections, and I would file away, here are the 3 next steps. And as soon as I get back to my little studio there, I would send that memo here, get that call scheduled here, shoot that text there, and then go shower and then stretch and then get on with the day. And then I'm, at the office by 7:30, and I'm, greeting my teammates as they come in, and we have a plan. So they actually were very, very additive. And I'll say in my new work in as state rep, it's running has never been more important, because at the end of a long day, there is so much to unpack. The learning curve is so steep and intense. And I run every single day. Today's day 1,447 in a row. And that daily running ritual is actually some of my best learning. And it can be the same little lap I do all the time, and yet I'm seeing things with a new perspective, in part because the little chatter in my brain is getting figured out and it's getting sorted.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And it sounds like running has played a role in your work and professional life, and there's lessons from even what you've learned as a runner that have influenced how you have approached your work life. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, spot on. Yep. I'm much better at what I do because of my running, for sure. Yeah.
You became an ultra runner after school, so this wasn't like something that you were trained on in school necessarily. How did you figure it out?
Part of what I love about ultra running, and an ultra marathon is any distance longer than a marathon. So, but when you run that 27th mile, you are into ultra territory. It's always an adventure, and there's always stuff that goes wrong and it does not go according to plan. And it's mobile problem solving. Like, you got to figure out how you deal with that blister on your foot, or that knee that feels a little wobbly, or that weird grumble in your stomach, or the bright sunshine and like I'm out of sunscreen, or whatever it is. Like, you gotta deal, and every other person out here is having to deal, and it's a really wonderful shared experience with a lot of camaraderie. And runners, I think by and large, very generous kind of spirit about folks, where folks will share, like, here's how I'm training, and here's the gear that's been most helpful to me, and here's this element that I've been experimenting with that's working for me. And so people share and share widely. So my first several years, just kind of experiment, DIY, and little by little, you do get better, and you start to figure out, like, I'm making better mistakes today than I did yesterday. And that's part of my mentality, is make better mistakes tomorrow. Like, every day, let's do a little bit better.
So let's take from there and come back to present. You've become an ultra marathon runner. It is a core part of who you are. You have kind of separated from some of the more traumatic and painful things that happened, led to a really challenging part of your life. You started a company, ended a company. You eventually went and worked at a executive recruiting firm, Parker Remick, for a year, and then decided to get into this. It's an odd. It's not a common pivot. So, like, take me a little. I know you already explained it a little bit at the beginning, but when did it? What are the sequence of events that got you there?
Yeah, so I coming back from China, I was really, really worn down. This is the top of this end of 2019, beginning of 2020. And I've just been on this long gauntlet of an experience, really worn down. This global pandemic hits. We're all isolated. And that was a tough stretch for me, where, I had all these big plans and ideas. I was trying to run across America that fall of 2020. That the timing was clearly not going to work with everything shut down. And so it was, basically just trying to stay afloat. And found my way into, I love team building. I love the power of what a great team can do. How do you build that? How do you get it aligned? And was eager to be part of, an organization that really knows that at a high level. And as I was getting plugged in on that front, I also was realizing just how important policy is and just how important decisions that impact our nonprofit work with our education access initiatives and youth mental health, just how vital all of that is. And so from a sequencing perspective, started showing up to meetings, started meeting a bunch of folks. And one of the things that's really nice is as you get to know each other and values and priorities and what we're all about, there's opportunities to like do good work together. And so, yeah, it began, helped launch a program called Poulsbo Fire Cares, which there's a lot of mental health challenges, addiction challenges, healthcare challenges. And a lot of the time we just send people to the ER and it's not actually able to really help them. Well, working on this program, I learned, wow, like when we support firefighters with social workers, we're way more effective. We get people into the rehab they need, the counseling they need, the pharmaceutical solution they need. We're able to really help. And getting, being a small part of that team, helping to like design a logo for this, it was like, wow, this is awesome. And that's part of what like good government's about, solving problems. And that was really a really beautiful spark for me in fall of 2020, where I realized, hey, like I have a bit of a knack for this. I really enjoy it. And like, I want to get more involved. And over the next couple of years, do exactly that. I start saying yes to various volunteer deals. And I was working really hard in my, this new day job, putting in 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And then on nights and weekends, I just had curiosity was my compass. I had a thirst to learn more. And I realized, hey, like I'm really interested in like these government projects. And, for instance, I'm really passionate about salmon recovery in Puget Sound. I think it's just such an important part of our culture, of our local economy, of our heritage here. And we've almost polluted our way to extinction and overfished our way to extinction. When I was in 6th grade, we raised salmon eggs in my middle school classroom. Life-changing experience for me. It was amazing. The salmon now coming back from the Pacific are the 7th generation of those I raised. It just feels really good. And I love sharing that with young people today of like, I want to get you plugged into the solution too. I had the amazing chance. I became one of the citizen advisors for our region's salmon recovery board. And that was so awesome. Just like learn more about the science, the ecology, the best practice, and then realize, like we have a good game plan. We need funding to make the game plan happen. And really the stars begin aligning where I start to realize, hey, part of how you can make a difference in the world is you got to find the thing that you're gifted at, that you're motivated by, the place where you have a little bit of leverage. And I realized, hey, like government service, there's a lot of ways to serve. Government is one of them. And there happened to be a vacancy, an opening in Kitsap for the legislature here. And the more I learned about like, here's what this job really is. You identify challenges and then you figure out how do we resource it the right way, build partnerships, get the right policy. Wow. Like youth mental health, salmon recovery, helping folks with addiction, building more housing, fixing our ferries. A lot of what I'm really like just deeply interested in. It's like, this is the kind of role where I can work at each of those in a portfolio with really smart people around. And it really just felt like a kind of a duck to water kind of a vibe with lots of challenges and a very steep learning curve. But my experiences in startup land where working 100 hours is certainly not uncommon. Just like that's the grind that you accept when you're getting into startups. Bringing a little bit of that natural intensity into this work, you can get something done, and it feels really gratifying when you're helping your neighbors, which is my favorite part of the role.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was going to ask you about. I could hear the energy crackling in your voice when you talk about this, that you clearly love this. Why does this matter to you?
Yeah, a big part of why it matters. My mom was a social worker for the state for 17 years. And she told me that you could always tell when leaders cared. It's hard to fake that, and people see right through it. You can tell when leaders care. I want to be the kind of leader that cares, that shows people they care. And that's a big part of why this work matters. When we get the policy right, when we get the budget right, we're funding the right priorities, making the right investments, and then we show up and we show we care. I think it kind of inspires and it enables really, really, really good work in our community where there's so many good ideas, there's so much good energy. How can government be part of the solution instead of being an obstacle or being part of the problem? And I'll say, I work with 97 colleagues in the State House of Representatives. Every single one of us, we care. And, we vote differently all the time and we disagree sometimes, with a lot of passion behind that disagreement. But there's no doubt people care and they care about their community. They have a different idea of how we fix the problem sometimes, but that's how this should work. And that's what a republic and a democracy is really all about. And we have a really good system here. And so, that Economist article, Sensible in Seattle, it was onto something. I think we got a lot of good stuff done. And the part I'm proudest of, we were able to pass our transportation budget, which fully funded our ferries by an overwhelming margin. It's like a 93-2 vote with every single Republican, every colleague across the aisle actually voting for our ferries. And so that was a really kind of beautiful moment where all of those early morning coffees and those lunches, those late dinners, getting to know colleagues and sharing why this matters. It pays off for us because every missed, ferry sailing, every canceled or delayed sailing is folks missing work, missing school, missing medical appointments. And I have the honor of representing Kitsap, where we've got the Kingston, Bainbridge, and Bremerton ferry docks in one of the most ferry dependent counties in the country. And I want to do what's right for our neighbors. And the cool part is a rancher from the east side of Washington who has ridden a ferry one time in his entire life, he realizes, wow, this really matters to your community. Yeah, I'm going to vote for it. And it's wow, amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Representative Dent. And that's a little bit of the vibe that I love around here is for Representative Dent, the thing that mattered most for his community was getting a beef commission funded. I don't know the first thing about a beef commission. It's what is this, man? And he's telling me in 5 minutes why this matters for him and his farming community. Yeah. It's hey, this, there are expenses with this, but it is absolutely the thing that we need to help lift up beef farmers and folks that eat beef like me. I love burgers. So there's a win-win here for me too. So that's part of what I love about this. And for skeptical listeners thinking, oh man, I'm so sick of all this, get involved locally, because the more local you are, the more you realize, hey, putting a sidewalk in here actually helps our community. Hey, putting up a, slow down, kids are crossing the street sign helps our community. A lot of that is local. And I, as a guy who's been involved locally for quite a while, it's really, really gratifying to see change really happen. And if you're fed up with the national stuff, cut off MSNBC or CNN or Fox and actually go to your city hall or go to your county commissioner or come down to Olympia and see your state government in action. Because there's a lot here that I think will be encouraging for folks the closer they get. Yeah. Because there's very little grandstanding. It's really roll up your sleeves. How do we actually solve the problem together?
I love that. And as someone who did his college time in Washington, D.C., I just think there's certainly downsides, but being close to it, being there physically and is amazing. Even come down here at Olympia today. It's just cool to be at the state capitol. Greg, last question I've got for you. What do you think your grandfather would say if he could see you doing what you're doing right now?
Hey, oh man, I've got a picture of both my granddads right back here. Grandpa Charlie there on the left, and then Grandpa Kick. He would oftentimes tell me how proud he was of me, and how he liked how hard I was working. And I think he would acknowledge both those. And then two of his signature quotes, he would tell me that he'd want to hug my neck, and he would come give me a big hug. And then his closing phrase every time was, "Show him your smoke." Go work hard, show him what you can do. And I think about that every time as I'm about to stand to give a speech on the House floor, testify in committee. I think about my granddad and how he would hardly believe that in 2 generations, here's his grandson doing what his grandson's up to.
I love it. Greg Nance, state representative for Kitsap County.
That's right. 23rd Legislative District, Kitsap County.
23rd Legislative District. Thank you so much for taking time today. And this has been great. I think what you've done in your time, on the planet is unique. And I think there's a lot to be gained from it. So really appreciate you sharing your story.
Hey, such an honor, Brian. Thank you.